You, Swami Satchitananda here. I want to spend a little time talking about something which is very significant and most of us are pretty weak in that. And that is the art of observation. See, there is a very nice Zen story that I read many years ago. It still keeps on striking me. So I'll tell you that story first. Okay. So there is this guy, young boy, he's about 7-8 years old. He wants to learn sword fencing. So he knows that one particular master is very good at that. So he goes to him and tells him, Master, I want to learn sword fencing. So he said, okay, come and stay here. So he stayed in that place where the master was living, along with other few pupils. And 1 year passed, 2 years passed, 3 years passed, 4 years passed, 5 years passed. No sword fencing at all. So he was saying, what is happening here? I came for something else is happening. I'm only doing cleaning, garden work, this work, that work, all the works that are to be done for the place here, but nothing he has taught me so far. So by the time he has become almost 13 or 14, and he was putting his hand on his head like that, and he was sitting outside the garden. And these masters, Zen masters, have a flap in their hand. So it's for hitting, but it is not for hitting to cause hurt, but to give you a shock. So from behind, the master came and gave him one shot properly on his head. This guy got a shock. He said, why are you hitting me, master? He said, you have not understood the art of observation and I cannot teach you anything. You better go somewhere else. So this boy was thinking, God in heaven. After so many years he's telling me that. So in the night, he's sitting there and he's saying what to do. He says, should I go now or not? And he decided not to go. And then after that, what happened was, every day when he was doing the work in the garden, he was very cautious that this man is going to come and hit him from behind. For some reason, he got frightened of that. And he became very, very aware of the sounds and all these things. And quietly, when he was looking, he could hear lots of sounds. Not one or two. Hundreds of sounds are there in the garden. Different animals, different crickets, different kind of bugs, all making different sounds. Different sounds are there, different colors are there. This whole thing is fully alive and kicking. And all these while he was doing the work, he never saw any of that. And then suddenly he heard the grass getting crushed by a feet. You know, when the grass gets crushed by the feet, he heard, and he turned back and he saw the master there. So that's observing. Come, let me teach you some little bit of what you came for. Then he starts him on the course for sword fencing. So observation is a very critical part, very, very critical part of one's life, particularly when it is about growing, managing relationships, you name it, right? So what is observation actually? Observation means the art of looking at something without bringing the past or the present into the picture. Just observing to see what it is or what is happening. If an element of your past comes in, if your element of your future comes in, you will not be able to observe. But what you see will be a distorted version of that reality. Right? So, most people don't observe. The mind is also a very fantastic instrument. See, it takes all sorts of shortcuts. It needs a little hint and it will make a framework and it will put the thing into a framework. Whatever you see into framework. I'll say, yes, I know. So, because it works very fast. So, to be able to be keeping the mind in control, at the same time not going to the past, not going to the future aspirations, etc. Just seeing things as they are is the art of observation. Now, what happens because of this? Suppose a person is sitting in front of you and talking to you. What are you looking at? Are you listening to the words? Are you listening to the non-verbal communication? Are you listening to the face, seeing the face? Are you seeing the hands? Are you seeing the legs? How they are saying, what they are sitting? Everything has to be taken into account if you say you are observing and listening. If you are only listening to part of the words, that is no listening at all. Because especially many people contradict themselves between what they say and what they mean. And you will never be able to find that out simply by listening to the words. So when you are observing the whole of the other person. When you are looking at something, you are seeing the whole of that thing. Not a portion, not colored with your own opinions, not colored with your own experiences. Okay? So if you are unable to observe and you take a decision of something that has to be done, then what happens? The chances of it being likely wrong are very high. Right? Why? Because you are not seeing the whole picture. Because you are not seeing the whole picture, the chances of error are very high. Okay. In relationships also, when people are not observing, even in very close relationship, they do not observe each other. Right? And if you want to observe each other closely, what your mate is doing, what your partner is doing, what your wife is doing, what your husband is doing, then you should be able to observe that person. You know, some women, some partners, when a man comes rushing from outside and he knocks the door, with the way they knock the door itself, they know this man is good, there is going to be a problem. And they will tell the children, you go from here, okay? You go and sit somewhere else. I have to deal with this with your father. And because there are some ways in which you communicate which knows what kind of background is going to come with. So if you don't know that, it will become into a confrontation. So sensitive partner will say, oh, there is a problem here, I'm not going to allow it to get diffused, and therefore deal with it in a different manner and not in a confrontationist manner, not pointing out the mistakes, this, that, etc. Many people want to dump their problems, office problems at home problem in the office. So in relationships, it's very important that you observe. In doing your work, it is very important that you observe. In managing people, it is very important that you observe your subordinates. Because if you can't manage your subordinates, one of the reasons is you have not really been observing them. And it's just not making an appraisal of the person, much more than that. So, when you are talking about spiritual life, we talk about observing the mind. Observe the mind is perhaps one of the most difficult processes, because the mind does not like to be observed. So, if you observe it for long enough time, it will diffuse itself. The thought will diffuse itself. But we should have the power to observe the mind without getting entangled emotionally with whatever that is coming up. Because one small attachment to one little thing will take you onto threads of different stories that the mind can create. And before 10 minutes are over, you never knew what happened, but it's taken you for a big ride to Disneyland and brought you back. Okay? All the rides it finished and came back. So, when you want to do meditation, observation is very important. Meditation, the process involves lessening the thoughts in the mind, right? You have to reduce the number of thoughts in the mind. I think I talked about it somewhere before. For reducing the thoughts in the mind, you need to be able to observe. And the more you observe the thoughts without getting entangled with them, slowly, the thoughts, they dissipate by themselves and the number of thoughts become less. Only when the number of thoughts become less can you find between the gap between one thought and another thought. We're talking about in meditation somewhere. For meditation to happen, the gap between the thought, which is silence, has to be found, and this can be done only when the mind is observing, being observed properly. And if you observe the mind properly, you will see that it is possible to reduce the number of thoughts in it. A person who cannot observe properly will not be able to do meditation. They will be doing something else, whatever you got to call it. It's a mental game, that's all. There is no meditation there. So observation becomes very critical, right? How do we develop this process? How do we develop this process? For meditation at least, there is a process available where we say that you have a lower self and you have a higher self. The higher self is represented by the Atman. So actually, who is observing the mind? The Atman is observing the mind, right? The higher self, which is not in your body-mind complex, is observing the mind. If you are able to sit on this throne of your own self, then it is possible to observe the mind. Otherwise, observing the mind becomes very difficult. You can't be in the mind and observe the mind. You have to be outside the mind to be able to observe it properly. So many people are not able to understand this differentiation because they sit somewhere else. They sit within the mind and they try to observe. It's not possible. You have to sit outside the mind. And yet when you sit outside the mind, we mean to your higher self. We call it Atman. You can call it your spirit. You can call it your essential self, whatever you want to call it. But it's not in a physical body-mind complex. So from that position, you can observe the mind without bringing the past or the future into it. And you will see that over a period of 10-15 minutes, number of thoughts will reduce. And slowly, you will be able to proceed forward in your meditation. Right? So, while speaking is very important, to my mind, observation is more important. Because observation has got to do with how well you listen. And if you don't listen well and you don't see well, talking becomes useless. It doesn't make sense at all. So think about it. Think about how you are observing today. Right? When you go into your house and you put your eyes around, can you see all that has happened with your absence? Everything has happened, many things have happened, but can you see it? So this should be brought to your focus, right? And find out ways and means of improving the observation process. You can go into the garden and pick out the different leaves of different plants, and you'll be surprised. You will be surprised the amount of plants and weeds that are growing over there. Okay? We never look at them. We take them for granted. So like this, we take our partner for granted. We take life for granted. So please start to make observation a serious posture if you really want to live well. Okay? Hari Om.